What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Damage Report here on a fantastic Thursday. I am your fill-in host, Francesca Fiorentini, back. I'm sorry I wasn't available on that Monday, but so excited to have with me Rebel HQ contributor and mayor of Enfield, North Carolina, Mondale Robinson. Mondale, how are you?
Wonderful. It's good to be with you again.
It's really good to be with you too. We have so much to get into. Of course, the speakership, I said it correctly the first time, speakership updates in the GOP on GOP crime that is our current Congress right now. We'll talk to you about what they're trying to get done, if anything at all. Some updates on the big Georgia RICO case against the Trump organization, or the Trump enterprise, if you will. Not the organization, the enterprise. The organization we will also get into. That's a New York case. A little bit later on, obviously, some updates on the resistance and the calls for ceasefire from American Jews here in the United States. And then some updates on the new culture war. New culture war, it's in the water, people. It's not turning the frogs gay, but it's doing other things. So stay tuned for that, as well as some new Amazon news. There are drones, they are coming. What are they delivering? We will look into it in the aftermath. So for now, do what you always do. You like the stream, you share the stream, you give it a little thumbs up-y poo, and write in your comments and your super chats. We'll get to them throughout our social breaks. Thank you guys so much again for being here and for being members and supporters and being such a great Dragon Squad. There is more news. Let's go with this.
Sidney Powell, one of the 19 co-defendants in the Trump election case in Fulton County, pleaded guilty. This is just one day before jury selection was set to begin in her trial.
Ooh, the Kraken has the last laugh. That's right. That is former Trump lawyer Sidney Powell, arguably, and this is a really, really steep contest, but perhaps one of the craziest voices inside of the Trump team, and one of the 19, including the former president himself, who were indicted on these criminal charges, these RICO charges for trying to overturn an election in Georgia. She pled guilty. She pled guilty, and you guys, we've been on this show. I've been hosting this show, and we talked to you about the first person to plead guilty. A bail bondsman named Scott Hall was the first guy to plead guilty, and we learned it looks good in terms of your sentence and what you're going to have to pay out, what you're gonna have to do, any time you might have to serve if you plead guilty early. So what did Sidney Powell get slapped with? Let's look at it. In her plea deal in Fulton County Superior Court, part of the deal is she has to plead guilty to 6 misdemeanor counts. Just misdemeanor counts. In her plea, Powell agreed to serve 6 years of probation, pay a $6,000 fine, and $2,700 in restitution to the state of Georgia. She also agreed to submit an apology letter to the citizens of Georgia and to testify, ooh, this is the big one, at related court proceedings. Just a little bit of backstory in case you're just waking up from a very long sleep. Congratulations, I'm sorry the world isn't better. But if you didn't know, Sidney Powell is she looks like a Yeti dressed in Talbots. But anyway, she also was one of Trump's lawyers after his 2020 election loss to Biden. She was charged with racketeering, conspiracy to commit election fraud, conspiracy to commit computer theft, trespassing and invasion of privacy, and conspiracy to defraud the state. She originally pled not guilty and had agreed to a $100,000 bond. Now we're looking at yes, guilty, almost $9,000 in penalties, 6 years probation, and then she has to testify. Mondale, what do you make of this?
It's a great day for everybody except for the people who are part of this racketeering. Here's what happened when what people thought was gonna happen when a couple of these cases were rushed or moved to a speedy trial because the defendants wanted them. Well, Donald Trump and everybody else thought they were going to see Fannie's, the attorney in charge here, case against them. So these pleading actually cut that out. And you just know that you have someone who pled guilty to these charges, part of this racketeering scheme. saying that they're going to testify against you. So this is bad news for everybody. Everybody involved with this trial. I think what happens though is this is exactly what we knew was going to happen. Like you said, the cracking is starting to crack. People are going to tell. This is Trump is the only person living in a mob movie in his mind about what's going to happen and who's going to remain faithful to him. I'm not even surprised if everybody does not plea out and just Trump is left standing with all of this weight of racketeering by himself.
Ooh, it's very exciting. And I agree with you, especially given the fact that she has to testify, which is the biggest thing. And here's CNN's Ellie Honig, who explains just why that is so damning to the rest of the defendants.
This is a major breakthrough for prosecutors, potentially a devastating development for Donald Trump, because what's going to happen now is Sidney Powell is going to testify for prosecutors in Georgia, and presumably she'll also be prepared to testify for Jack Smith in his federal case in Washington, D.C. She's not indicted in that case, but she's listed as a co-conspirator in that case. She's going to be able to provide insider information that could be really devastating towards Donald Trump.
How can prosecutors now use her?
So you use her to bring your jury into that very room. She will be the guide. She will be the narrator. She will be able to say, I was in this room with Donald Trump, with Rudy Giuliani. Here's what we discussed. Here's who said what. Here's what we knew. And John, really importantly, in order to take this plea and this deal, Sidney Powell is going to have to acknowledge what we did was criminal. It was illegal. It was a crime. And so that's going to lend a lot of credibility, I think, obviously, to prosecutors' assertions that what Donald Trump did was knowingly a crime.
I have to say, Mondale, I am quite surprised that it's Sidney Powell and not some of the other folks whose names have not been in national news, who've not been Fox News regular contributors, spouting the conspiracies of the big lie over and over again. Like, I've yet to hear her utter any kind of word of backtracking from the things that she said. So it is really striking that she's number 2 to go down in this plea deal. And I'm very curious to hear what, Honig just outlined there. Like, I want that on tape. And my question is also like, is part of this, you can't go on Fox News, you can't go on Steve Bannon's War Room and say the exact opposite of what you might have said behind closed doors, right? The Jack Smith case, of course, is also a federal case, or is a federal case, and that's not gonna be televised. It's about the January 6th, insurrection, et cetera, et cetera. But I will say, it's such a slap on the wrist that the real value in her plea is exactly that, is the evidence that she can provide against all of these other defendants, all of these other people. Because $6,000 fine, an apology letter to Georgia, 6 probation for misdemeanors. Come on now. Like, if this were anyone else, again, but these white collar criminals, you could only imagine what their deals would look like.
Yeah, but this is the nature of racketeering. Like, when you're going after the enterprise, those who are not at the top calling shots usually find themselves walking away with something small. We saw this a lot in New York, where ironically, Giuliani actually basically created the racketeering standard across this country. When he was going after the mob, we saw a lot of low-level mob members walking away with probation or witness protections in some cases, even after they had done things as horrendous as murder. So we know what the point is, and the point is all of those other 19 or so people that have charged, or those who are not charged but were named, are also a part of what they want, and what they want is Donald Trump. And I think to get Donald Trump on what they're going to get him on racketeering in Georgia carries a lot of years. I think this is where we find ourselves. I think they call it blind justice, but we know what it is.
I'm just very fast forward to if Donald Trump ever sees any kind of, even if it's like house arrest or probation himself or whatnot, I just love fast forwarding and imagining Sidney Powell trying to raise money to free our president, even though it was her who helped throw him under the bus. I'm just curious where the grift goes, and once it gets sort of dammed up in certain ways, how it flows around the obvious, whatever, forsaking your Lord and Savior, as is happening right now. But we'll see. We'll see whether Sidney openly, maybe she's actually nuts. Maybe she's just well, the prophecy of Q says that ... which, and this is my other question. Mondale, and this is the last thing I'm gonna say. If I'm representing Sidney Powell, I feel like pleading insanity is perhaps my best defense, because it's easy. And if other people, we will see how I'm sure other lawyers of the people that Sidney Powell might be implicating will say Sidney Powell's crazy. Like Sidney Powell's nuts. Like Sidney Powell believed, like the QAnon conspiracies or whatnot, they all thought she was nuts behind doors. How can they sort of isolate her as someone who was always sort of the weird wild card in the room, who, however, was in the room time and time and time again. And look what a liability she's become. Anyway, let's turn to a different aspect of this, guys. So there's more updates in the New York trial against Donald Trump. Again, this is for the overinflation of his assets. It's just to see what the damages are, because the judge has already found him liable for that financial fraud. And there was some kind of spicy moments in the courtroom, including Donald Trump smacking his hands on the table. So how did it happen? So it's all started with a real estate brokerage executive named Doug Larson, who was an appraiser for Trump properties for lenders. And he was taken aback when told on the stand that he was repeatedly cited as an outside expert in former Trump organization controller Jeffrey McConney's valuation spreadsheet. So his name is invoked. He didn't know that. He says on the stand, it's inappropriate and inaccurate. I should have been told, and an appraisal should have been ordered. So for example, when it came to valuing a storefront known as Nike Town, McConney, this is the controller, relied on rates of a return for a different type of property rather than for a comparable retail space. Larson testified. He also said he appraised a Trump-owned Wall Street building at only 540 mil, while McConney valued it at 735.4 mil on Trump's financial statement. So he's there. He is a witness for the prosecution right there. He's saying, look, yes, I advised him. I didn't advise him on this particular instance. How dare they? I did on this one. They overinflated it by $200 million, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is when Trump gets big mad. Apparently, he then had to be warned by the judge. Here's how it went down. He was accused, however, of Doug Larson on the stand is accused of lying, and it seems like he might have. When he testified that back in 2013, he never had a discussion with the Trump executive about a particular way of setting a value to one of Trump's skyscrapers. Trump appeared to be following the appraiser's testimony closely, and minutes earlier, he had caused some tumult by audibly reacting. Trump could be heard whispering angrily to the lawyers on either side of him. At one point, he hit the wooden defense desk with both of his hands. A lawyer for Letitia James, the state attorney general, objected without naming Trump to the, quote, exhortations coming from the defense table that prompted the judge, State Supreme Court Justice Arthur Engoron, to ask that there be no further exhortations, particularly if it was meant to influence the testimony. So he was pissed, Trump's pissed, because it seems like Larson was caught in a little bit of a lie, potentially. It seems like the lies are floating both ways here. What was the lie? Trump's defense lawyer, Lazaro Fields, in this cross-examination on Wednesday, had copies of emails that Larson sent to McConney, the controller, basically saying like, look, you did advise us on this particular issue. You said you didn't. And because let's go back. According to Insider, on Tuesday, Larson answered, no, I did not. When a lawyer for the attorney general asked, did you work with Mr. McConney in 2013 to determine a cap rate that he used to value this property? You lied yesterday, didn't you? Fields shouted at the appraiser, continuing to wave a stack of emails in his hand. I did not. That's what I recall, the appraiser answered, as more than one of the attorney general's lawyers half rose from their seat to shout objection. So again, there's no honor among thieves. These are a lot of, this is a lot of the same kind of muck, right? This guy Larson, he appraised certain properties, he didn't others. It seems like maybe Trump's lawyer Fields did catch him in a lie because he's got emails to prove that he did appraise him. Drama, drama, drama. I'm just waiting for the TV, like rendition of this. Then Trump's lead lawyer, however, after all this, stood from his seat and interrupted the exchange by insisting the appraiser was in need of legal protection. And from a perjury charge, quote, he has the right to consult with his counsel, Your Honor. I think he needs to be advised as to potential perjury. And then Larson gets escorted out, and it's very, very dramatic. But Mondale, I like this for the drama effect. I'm lost as I think these gentlemen are lost in the details of who, what, why, where, and when they appraise certain properties. But I think all of these things can be true, right? Yes, you appraised some properties. Yes, they overinflated how much you appraised it for.
Yeah, I think the theater here was, I feel like the state's attorney office missed an opportunity here to come back and re-question their witness and set things straight. So the question that Trump's attorney screamed across the courtroom was actually one that could have set himself up to be slam dunk. The question was, did you work with Trump's team, the comptroller, to come to these the terms of the numbers of this property? And the witness's response was, no, I didn't. All the state attorney had to say was, why didn't you? And he could have said, well, they inflated the numbers. I didn't help them come to those numbers. And I think that's where they missed the ball at. So it could have been that, yeah, he was lying, but you could have easily cleaned this up with the fact that Trump's team inflated the numbers that I gave them. So that's not me working with them. They did not take my advice. So I think, like you said, this right here is something that Trump will run with, but Trump runs with anything, even when he shouldn't.
Oh, exactly, and he has claimed fake victory over this one moment again, where potentially his former appraiser was caught in a lie. Take a look.
Why aren't you campaigning, sir?
Because I want to be at this trial, because I want to see what's happening at this trial, and because moments like this have just knocked this trial down to a level that it should be dismissed.
Will you appeal?
This trial is a disgrace. This trial is a disgrace. Should have never been brought. And if you watched what just took place in the courthouse, if you reported honestly, and I'm sure you will, because there's really no other way you can report it, the government lied. They knew everything about what just took place, and the government lied, and they lied to the people. The Attorney General lied because he wanted to get elected by using Trump. And if you look at what just took place, the government has been now proven to be a liar. And there has to be some kind of recourse for what's going on. And that's why I'm here. Because if I wasn't here, probably maybe people wouldn't see the facts the way they are.
So, a lot of L words for a man who likes to L a lot. This one tiny potential lie, which honestly, Mondale, it seems to me that Larson, the appraiser, did or didn't maybe discussed ways to like value a certain property and categorize it in a way to avoid paying or paying taxes and or inflating it to get more loans, as this is the case revolves around that entire premise, right? Of overinflating your assets to then get more loans, to then invest and get more money, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And my thing is just like, this is just white collar crime. It doesn't really matter that Larson was, if anything, he's part of it, right? Trump is saying there was a lie, but all the lie proves is that he was ultimately helping you in defrauding the state of New York, which is what this case is about.
Yeah, and beyond that, let's be serious. He's not a part of Trump's organization. Trump's team did something they went further and further with this lie. They lied about the occupancy. They lied about, they inflated even his number, even if his numbers were inflated. So I think they're comparing different types of properties. That's like me saying my house is worth the same amount as the business down the street because it's in the same neighborhood.
Right.
And it's just absolutely ridiculous for Trump to actually say this. And then if you notice what he told the media when he went outside, the government lied to get elected, the attorney general. First of all, if she's trying to get elected, she's not the attorney general, so she's not the government. Secondly, it wasn't the government on the stand as a witness. It is this muddle. This is what Trump does. He muddles all situations, which is what people eat up out in the world and start these new conspiracies. So right now you'll have Trump has debunked this lawsuit because the government lied on him, and he just proved that nobody will vet it. It'll be all over Fox News, and it'll be the new arm for all of the MAGAs in the world. It is tragic, actually.
It's true. It's just like the whistleblowers for the Hunter Biden cases, where are they? What are those people again? It's just, Yes, it's all to say like, but did you hear about that appraiser? Like, who cares? What about that appraiser? He took, of course, to Truth Social and bleated the same thing. New York State Attorney AG Letitia James, who sued me on a statute never used before for such a case, had a bad day in the rigged trial, blah, 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 without even discussing the $18 million value she ascribes to Mar-a-Lago. This is a Democratic scam, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. My favorite part, we haven't talked about this, Mondale, you and I, but he's still so mad that she valued Mar-a-Lago at 18 million instead of 1.8 billion, which is what he says, billion. That it's almost worth $2 billion. I'm like, dude, not if you bury bodies on your property. Although, I think maybe that increases the value. Maybe you get a tax break. I bet you get a tax break. In fact, I think you do get a tax break if you have like a cemetery. Anyway, talking about his ex-wife. He went even further. He is posting a Substack by Laura Loomer, obvious like MAGA pilled psycho, saying her fake case against me should be dropped immediately. About Letitia James, my financial statements are extremely conservative. Her numbers are way off. She didn't reveal the 100% disclaimer clause at the front of the financial statements. Yeah, the disclaimer clause, that's my favorite part. The thing about this Substack, however, is that it lists Letitia James's home address, people. So that's the kind of thing that he is doing. He's done since he started running for president, right? Sicking people on real people and doxing them effectively. Letitia James clearly not swayed and scared by this, tweeting out, Donald Trump can call me names. Donald Trump can try to cause distractions. But at the end of the day, he engaged in persistent fraud, and we will continue to demonstrate that in court. There you go. I mean, I appreciate that. Like, Letitia James is not effing around here, and I guess I just think it's so funny that his defense is the disclaimer. But it said in small writing, do your own homework and do your own diligence. It's your fault that I did the fraud. What? Mondale, final thoughts here.
Yeah, I think, listen, Trump is unbelievable. When it's time to get a loan from someone or get money from some institution, Mar-a-Lago is worth 1-point-something billion. But when it's time to pay taxes on it, it's worth 27 million, according to his own organization's paper. So I think this idea that Trump can float numbers whenever he wants to benefit him in both manners is par for the course. Here's what I would say, though. As an elected official who is currently running from property, house to house because the Klan is trying to kill me because I tore down a statue, it is not funny that someone's name and address is put out. Not only because that person is human and that person is a public servant, but also because they may have family members who did not sign up to be a public servant and do not deserve what kind of craziness Donald Trump is unleashing on people, as we've seen as the case with so many incidents throughout his presidency and while he was running for president and since he's been unelected. So this is not a small thing to talk about, and especially when you're quoting a white nationalist sympathizer like Laura. I'm disgusted with that. And the fact that the court is quiet on that is scary to me.
Well, the fact that he is allowed access to his Truth Social accounts, right? The fact that he is allowed to keep tweeting something like this. When someone is a danger and they are under criminal indictment, they are usually imprisoned. They are held until trial, right? They are held every single day. They are not allowed to be using their phones because they would do things like this. And this is exactly what he's proving. So it is, again, the two-tier justice system, yeah, it is real, as MAGA people say. It just works in their favor, and they'll never admit that. Let's take our first break, guys. There is a lot more, including Israel-Palestine updates and the speakership, horse race, dog and pony, cat show. Cat show? It's a cat show. Be right back. The civil war that Republicans always wanted is happening, but it's happening in their own party. Ooh, so close. And just a little recap of where we're at. Jim Jordan has lost the second round of voting. That was Wednesday, after 22 Republicans voted for candidates besides him. That is more Republicans who voted for other candidates than the first vote. And usually you wanna go in the opposite direction, but no. He was 18 votes shy, and the first speaker nominee from the majority of party to get less than 200 votes since 1923. So, he's winning in that sense by losing. It's the biggest loser situation here. Again, that's 22 defections versus 20 defections. And this is breaking. He says he's not running again. Jim Jordan's done. He's out. He's tapped out. 2 was enough, as it seemed like he was going in, again, the wrong direction. His spokesperson, Russell Dye, told reporters after the vote Wednesday that Jordan is going to keep going, even though nearly 24 Republicans, this is old. He's not going to keep going. Jordan Dye is wrong. And he didn't keep going, and scene. So there was a lot of reasons that the writing was on the wall. So this is more relevant and recent. He says he's not pursuing that third vote. He's gonna back a plan, however, to expand the legislative powers of Speaker pro tempore Patrick T. McHenry, according to people familiar with the situation who spoke on condition of anonymity. Jordan's dropping his bid, remains the speaker designee, and will reserve the option to hold a speaker vote at any time. What? I don't think I understand that last part, but maybe Mondale can clarify it. But basically, Mondale, where we're at right now is that it seems like the stand-in guy, the speaker pro tempore, who is restricted from doing a lot of things, like bringing votes. Like I think he can call committees, but he can't even bring a vote to the floor. They're gonna elevate him because he upsets no one. It's not very clear. However, this is some new reporting from Rob Costa, who actually interviewed the former speaker, Newt Gingrich, who said Speaker pro tempore McHenry is a lot better solution than the gridlock and chaos. He should be empowered this week, and let's get on with people's business. And then John Boehner, also a former speaker, a Republican speaker, tweeted, I agree. So at least Republicans who are not in power agree that the guy who's not in power should be in power. Mondale, make sense of this for me.
Yeah, I mean, you call it the cat show, dog show. It's a clown show. I mean, I can't make sense of anything the Republican Party is doing right now. I do know that the Republican Party has this wonderful chant to say whenever they can't get an election right, it's the Democrats' fault. They're running around saying Democrats are trying to ruin democracy because they can't pick a speaker, which is the dumbest thing in the world, except for Republicans are actually buying it. Republicans that are not elected, those who vote for them, is actually buying this ridiculousness. We didn't depend on we didn't depend on Republicans when we were in power to help elect our speaker. So I don't understand what they were expecting. It was going to be easy for them. Patrick McHenry, to me, is absolutely should be powerless. I used to live in the 10th district, which is one of the most conservative districts in this country. It's in North Carolina, close to the mountains in the foothills. And this is one of those people who has enriched himself by bowing down to corporate interests. He went into Congress worth his house about $480,000. Now he's worth multiple tens of millions of dollars right now. This is not a person who has a spine for anything. He's one of those sick conservatives that came in and move around with the Tea Party. So we are not being blessed with Patrick McHenry. Him being limp is the best thing that we can wish for. And when they vote to give him power, if Democrats go along with that, they're going to wish they didn't, because he's as sick as any other Trump Republican.
Right, but he is not as out in front, right? People aren't familiar with him. So I'm really glad that you brought some of those receipts. And I mean, look, that's par for the course, right? In terms of Republicans and even, elected representatives by and large, in terms of like enriching themselves and using their positions of power to do so, sadly. But Jim Jordan's going along with this, I guess. Marjorie Greene says she doesn't know why they're doing this, which honestly, I have to double that. Like, I don't know why they would do this. Why not just elect one of your, Klansmen without the baggage, like Scalise, or obviously like Jordan. But however, senior Democrats might be supportive of this plan because it at least reopens the government. They can, decide on this continuing resolution for a budget. They can avoid a shutdown or try to avoid a shutdown. So we'll see. I don't know, Mondale, can you weigh in here what you think? Do you think Democrats should support this interim, or should they hold the line? And who knows, maybe they F up so bad that Hakeem Jeffries becomes speaker.
I think that's absolutely right. Why would you actually do anything other than that? I mean, we could demand so much right now. The idea as it pertains to we're dealing with two wars that these Republicans are not willing to support. We need help on both of those as it pertains to making sure that we understand that America is not this isolated island. It requires peace in other parts of the world for us to survive and hold on to democracy, not just here, but abroad as well. So I think, holding the line and not supporting any deals as it pertains to Patrick McHenry or any other temporary speaker, I think this is a wonderful opportunity to demand things like this idea that we can actually fund programs that we need. And I think in order to do that, and I think that maybe, let me backtrack. Maybe that is an instant where we should support Patrick McHenry. And that's if we get what we demand. Like, let's demand some things and get something out of this, i.e. a real budget and not a continuing resolution. Let's get a budget that's beneficial to people and not corporation. Let's see if we can get that out of them. And that's the only way we partner with them. Other than that, let them swallow.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really interesting point. You have to wonder whether or if, the war in Gaza and the attacks from Hamas had not happened, whether Democrats would feel a little bit less urgency around this, right? Because that sort of changed things in terms of they're really rushing, and we're gonna get into this, to try and send even more money to the region. I have a lot of personal thoughts on that, and why I think money in the region is the problem. But obviously, you talk about Ukraine, which is, again, an ongoing war in their fight against Russia and Russian aggression. So it's interesting, right? It's interesting to see the balance and who would even cut this kind of a deal for someone as still terrible as Patrick McHenry, and who wants to hold the line. And I think maybe even ironically, it might be, senior Democrats, that includes Jeffries himself. It might be even Jeffries who's like, let's go with this pro tempore speaker. We're gonna follow this, right? We're gonna keep on this. I'm curious to see how all the chips are gonna lie.
But unlike any other speaker we've had, he's had the courage to talk about a long-term plan and to get at the real drivers of debt. And we all know what they are. We all know it's Social Security. We all know it's Medicare. We all know it's Medicaid. No president of either side has been willing to deal with this. No speaker of either side has been willing to deal with this. This is the guy that wants to create a debt commission, a bipartisan debt commission, and get at the roots of our spending problem. That takes courage.
Don Bacon there, Republican from Nebraska, sort of lays out to CNN's Jake Tapper why Republicans didn't get on board with Jim Jordan. And there are three buckets of Republicans that he sort of carves out. One are the diehards, two are the people who didn't like that he's not playing by the rules effectively, and three are the moderates. So take a look at him sort of breaking it down, and then we'll discuss.
You have some group that's worked with him going back 10 years, and they've worked with him on appropriations. More senior folks where he's created a lot of chaos. I'm in the other camp where I don't like how he got here, right? He got here with a small number of Jordan backers, who 8 of them, for example, 7 of them backed him, but there was 8 total. That was vacated the chair on Kevin McCarthy. And then we voted for Steve Scalise, and he got the majority vote. And then we had 5 Jordan backers say they would never vote for Steve, right, but would only vote for Jim Jordan right after Steve won. And also at the same time, Jim Jordan told everybody that he would only get behind Steve if he had 217 votes. That is not our rules.
So there's Don Bacon of Nebraska basically saying, like, Jordan's not playing by the rules, which is majority. You get the majority, you vote for the majority. Scalise had the majority. What are we doing? So Jordan wouldn't back Scalise in the same way that it seems like Scalise might back Jordan, and others would back Jordan as well. So he's pissed that Jordan's not playing by those rules. The third group he doesn't even mention that we've talked about a lot are those Republicans in those swing districts, the Republicans who represent, this is graphic 7, competitive districts, places where Joe Biden won 2020 and a Jordan speakership could be toxic. You got Representative John James, Lori Chavez, DeRemer, Bacon, Kiggins, and Gonzalez. A subset of these lawmakers are Republicans from New York who represent solidly Biden districts like Lawler, LaLota, Garbarino, and Anthony Desposito. So they're all kinds of messed up right now, right? To the point where they're going potentially with the speaker pro tempore, Patrick McHenry. But I have a lot of more thoughts on this, but Mondale, please jump in.
Yeah, I think that list of names you just read, it reads like how Democrats get their majority back. I don't know why right now they're not in those districts up on TV, on radio, and mailing out information about what the Republicans are doing and why this country is so dysfunctional as it pertains to protecting our democracy. So I think the Democrats, once again, are missing an opportunity. And I think this is also why Republicans like Bacon are being so vocal against Jim Jordan, who was nothing more than a lapdog for Donald Trump during his administration. And I think what we see is the unraveling or the pathway to unravel Donald Trump's strength over Republicans. While it plays well in primaries, Republican primaries, it does not play well in legislating. It does not play well in control, and it definitely doesn't play well with getting things done in Washington, D.C. So I'm extremely happy about where we find ourselves. I enjoy the messiness that is the Republican Party right now in the House of Representatives.
Yes, amen. And like, especially like New York Democrats, get your stuff together. Like, everything was redistricted, not in your favor. Like, come on, you cost us Congress last time around. Get your stuff together. Like, yes, pound the pavement, knock the doors, send out the mailers, because these could absolutely be swing districts, and we could regain control of the House and actually get stuff done for the American people. Before we go, you gotta know that Jim Jordan's like stooges are sending out text messages to Don Bacon's wife. So I guess wives and family members of people who aren't voting for Jordan or are pissed at Jordan. So this is a text message that Don Bacon shared with the NBC saying, why is your husband causing chaos by not supporting Jim Jordan? I thought he was a team player. This is from Don Bacon's wife. Who is this? Oh, so now you have nothing to say? This was great. Your husband will not hold any political office ever again. What a disappointment and failure he is. And then she writes, he has more courage than you. You won't put your name to your statements. Like, what is this? Like, this is, and again, these are all the tactics that Republicans usually reserve for Democrats, usually reserve for elected officials. This is like doxing, stalking, psycho stuff. They're just sending text messages to people's wives. Yeah, that's not gonna win you any favors. That is like mafia tactics. Mondale, have the last word and we'll go. Oh wait, you muted yourself.
I mean, it's true. What else are we supposed to say other than it's like mafia tactics? The idea that this is like, you can literally send death threats to someone's wife. This is exactly what I was talking about in the last segment. But the fact that they'll pretend that they don't know who did it and how it happened, it's ridiculous because it happened as soon as he voted against him. This is not enough time for anybody that's not closely linked to Jordan to not have a role in this. So I wish they were investigating this. However, they will say this is not a real true threat because it wasn't possible to carry it out at that moment. This is ridiculous. This is nasty politics, but this is Donald Trump's world.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the culture that he created. Let's take our second break and we'll jump back into more news after this. Welcome back to the Damage Report, everybody. Francesca Fiorentini here, Mondale Robinson over there. We got to get into the latest updates on Israel's war on Gaza and Hamas's attacks and the amount of devastation that it has caused and the amount of lives lost, but not without some actual resistance, especially from activists here at home. Take a look. So hundreds of Jewish American activists have been in DC, in the Capitol and surrounding buildings, protesting the US's support for the ongoing violence in the Middle East against Israel and Hamas, calling for a ceasefire. Those groups are If Not Now and Jewish Voices for Peace, some of the leading organizations, but so many people are taking part in this, saying not in our name, some really inspiring words. Well, let's get into it. Of course, Capitol Police arrested 300 people. They were protesting inside of that rotunda on the Cannon House office building, demanding Congress pass a ceasefire resolution in the Israel-Gaza war amidst an intensifying humanitarian crisis. And just to be clear, this is the Cannon building. It's not the Capitol building. But look, let's listen to American Jews. What are they saying? They're saying, and specifically the ones in DC, American Jews and allies, they're worried about the Palestinians in Gaza, and they rallied on the National Mall saying so. They held a banner with writing that said, "Our blood is the same color," and waved Palestinian flags, raised posters that read, "My grief is not your weapon," and "Never again for anyone," and "Zionism is racism." There were Jewish people wearing prayer shawls and kibbut, young activists sporting tattoos and nose rings, and people in headscarves and Palestinian checkered black and white scarves. Those are called keffiyehs. Thank you, Washington Post, for explaining these activists. So again, there were rabbis there, 25 rabbis who were against the occupation. And calling not in our name. Just an update, the death is only rising in Gaza, and this is of course on the other side of the bombing of the Baptist hospital that Israel has now blamed on Hamas, which is interesting considering they regularly target hospitals. But about 3,875 people, Palestinians, have been killed in Gaza, including 500 in that hospital, about 12,500 wounded. There are still about 200 Israeli hostages being held by Hamas, and there's not clarity on what is being done, if anything is being done to release them. Just this morning, however, Hamas did claim responsibility for 30 rockets that were fired into Israel from southern Lebanon. So it's getting worse. People, leaders of Egypt and Jordan have met, and they're warning against this wider regional war. And they're also saying, look, we're not going to absorb the Palestinian refugees, the injured, the people who have no home to go back to given this evacuation for northern Gaza. We're not going to accept 1 million refugees, not because we don't, have hearts and home and whatnot, but because this is the making of a war. This war needs to end. A little bit more before I kick it to you, Mondale, but look, you don't always see representatives and electeds coming out for these protests, but Cori Bush and Representative Rashida Tlaib did speak at the event. They lent their solidarity. Both of them have called for a ceasefire, an immediate ceasefire. And I think that's huge. I think that's really important. Before we get into the reaction from the right, I just wanted to ask you about the importance of, and how interesting it is that protesters are the ones calling for restraint, right? That somehow a ceasefire is seen as this radical position at a time when, thousands of people are being killed and hostages are still being held.
Yeah, I mean, this is a serious situation. What actually this protest says to America is, once again, the people of America are more progressive, are more forward thinking than those that are in elected positions. The idea that you would have not just Republicans, but also Democrats like Debbie Wasserman Schultz out attacking Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib for their comments is absolutely ridiculous. So what we just see our Jewish brothers and sisters do in DC is give protection for America to say, we need to take a step back and look at what's the most humane reaction to this situation. We're not condoning, we're not sympathizing with Hamas. We know who they are, we know what they are. But this idea that we can drop 6,000 bombs and Israel, and by default, America too, right? Can drop 6,000 bombs in a space the size of Detroit in less than a week. Yep. When we drop that many bombs across the entire country of Afghanistan in a year, the most dense place in the world is Gaza Strip. So to say that we don't have a role to play in demanding some type of help when we are spending so much to protect Ukraine from the same type of aggression is absolutely ridiculous. We absolutely believe that Israel has a right to address what's going on with Hamas. That does not give them the right to put civilians in this way and this much harm. It is absolutely disgusting that our politicians do not have a backbone to say what these protesters were saying, what Ilhan Omar, AOC, and others are saying. So yeah, I think this is absolutely powerful to have Jewish brothers and sisters out there protesting Zionism and in this manner.
Absolutely.
I'm so sorry. One more thing. It is also this protest also says that there's something bigger than what happened a week ago. They're saying that there's 75 years of history that we need to address what's happening in this moment.
Absolutely. And I just want to also say, like, I think when people see signs like Zionism is racism, it's jarring, and especially to American Jews who have been taught that, like Israel is the safest place for Jews, right? And there are free trips for them to go there. And conveniently ignore the occupied West Bank and other places. But I did just want to say that, for those out there who may be taken aback by some of the signs, right? Who don't agree with them, that you don't personally have to agree with every single sign. You don't have to agree with every single policy position. You don't have to have the solution to know that the killing of innocent people is wrong and that the ongoing support for that killing is also wrong. And so we can all agree on a ceasefire, even if we don't all agree on the ultimate solutions or any kind of, the signage or, that it hasn't been, completely, vetted, that we all agree that Zionism is racism. I just want to name that because I think we get sort of waylaid in the details. But I do want to talk because look, this is on the other side of President Biden's visit to Israel, his physical embrace of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who, and I just have to say this, from the official Twitter of the Israeli PM, Benjamin Netanyahu's account, they tweeted the other day this. They said, this is a struggle between the children of light and the children of darkness, between humanity and the law of the jungle. That tweet has since been deleted, but that gives you an insight into how Israeli government officials and how Benjamin Netanyahu views Palestinians. The children, the law of the jungle, children of darkness. Children of darkness, I can only assume, are Palestinians. Children of the light, I guess, are Israelis. If you needed any more evidence that we do not and they do not value human life equally, there it is. I guess it's been deleted, so that's fine. But that hasn't stopped the Biden administration from continuing to ask for more support for Israel. They're telegraphing to members of Congress, the Biden administration is, that they might request upwards of $100 billion in a national security supplemental package that would include increased aid to Israel, Ukraine, Taiwan, and include money for the US southern border. Two sources familiar told CNN. So I guess kudos to not only giving that money to Israel, but it's a bunch of military solutions packaged into one. The details haven't been finalized, but there's also a much smaller initiative to send aid to Gaza. Biden's committing $100 million in humanitarian assistance to Gaza and the West Bank to support more than 1 million people displaced by the ongoing conflict. However, that's been very tempered by saying, if any of this ends up in Hamas's hands, we will rescind it. Mind you, if Hamas is the governing body of this area, the idea that it would not at some point end up in the governing body's hands, I think, is a ludicrous idea. But also, Mondale, the idea that assistance could even get into Gaza when borders have been bombed by Israel, when there is no lift to the blockade, economic blockade for any other country to get any kind of assistance in there. And the idea that there is no ceasefire, what are we actually talking about when we're talking about humanitarian aid?
Yeah, I mean, it's almost as if we didn't learn or don't learn from past incidents, right? I think this idea that we're going to continue to, and I think someone said that this, and it was a wonderful idea. Who benefits from, or if China weapons were being used in Israel right now, would America be trying to create $100 billion package? But because of the fact that these weapons are produced in America and the weapons lobbyists are pushing so hard for this, it's going to pass so easily. And I think that is a scary thought, but it's also a reality that we need to deal with. What I was going to say also is this idea that we need to prevent Hamas from having a say in what's about to happen. We need to remember what happens when America nation builds or try to nation builds. It was our smart idea to get rid of Gaddafi that killed, that literally we let him be drugged down the street, and that actually killed what was one of the most stable countries in Africa and also our biggest ally in the Arab world. We did the same thing in Iraq when we killed Saddam Hussein, and look at that country now. So this idea that we're going to replace Hamas without a natural or a pathway forward is absolutely scary to me. And what comes next? What's next?
Absolutely. And in those cases that you mentioned, as awful as those leaders were, what came next was something even far worse. So you're 100% right that we need to get out of the Middle East. And that includes funding, weapons of war and conflicts and wars like this. It's unfathomable to me. I mean, we vetoed the UN resolution for a ceasefire. That's what the United States has been doing this week, you guys. Tomorrow, we'll all join you again and we'll do a little bit of a roundup of what's happened in the region this week. So there will be more from the damage report. But that does it for our hour. There is more in the aftermath, y'all. So join us on YouTube if you're on linear, and we'll see you then.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Damage Report. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, John Adarola. I'll see you soon.